Hey, what's going on, cash flow hackers? It's Chris with Life 180. I have Sean Walker here with API Law, and we've been sitting here talking a bunch about all the craziness online when it comes to trusts and how they're marketed and how they're planned and how they actually affect you. I think this is probably one of the topics in the financial space that has more clickbait around it than anything else that I've ever seen. And so we're going to try to cut through the noise, and we're going to do a little bit of a series talking about the most relevant stuff when it comes to trust planning for you. And so make sure, if you haven't already, you subscribe and hit the bell. That way you're notified when all these videos come out. We're going to have a full playlist. But today, Sean, let's talk about revocable trusts, right? Because I think there's a lot of confusion for people who are just kind of starting to go down this path, and maybe they have some assets, maybe they're wanting some protection, maybe they watched a video on Instagram or TikTok and they were like, oh my gosh, I need that. And it may or may not be what they need. So can we just like strip away all the clickbait, strip away all the hype, and just talk about what is the purpose of a revocable trust? What problems does it solve? And what protections does it provide for people, and who is it applicable for?
Yeah, no, great, Chris. We get a lot of these questions that come into our office that we have to kind of retrain our clients based on what they've seen, mostly on social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we try to get them to focus on building a foundation, which is actually very inexpensive to do when you first start out with a revocable living trust.
Love it.
And the main goal is to avoid perhaps the biggest creditor that will ever come after you, which is the government. So when you pass away, the government brings an action against your estate, a lawsuit that says through a probate action, you have to settle up your debts with the government on back taxes. And then they do a public notice to any potential creditors and or family members that think that you still owe them money. And so what we try to do is set up a revocable living trust with some other types of documents to make it so you avoid probate and a government lawsuit when you pass away. And that's really kind of a different way to think about it, but most people don't think about it that way. They think, I'm young, I don't have a lot of assets, I don't need to put these things in place, or they go buy a $75 will online thinking that that's going to do it, and they get a false sense of security right out of the gate.
So the revocable trust, can you explain, and don't go too into detail, we're going to go in another video into detail, but when we're talking a revocable trust, that's not the asset protection trust. There's a completely different structure, completely different purpose of that, right? Because I think a lot of people watching and a lot of people that get, interested in this, we have income ranges all over the place, net worth, amounts all over the, wide range of individuals, and everything from zero net worth and finally starting to maybe have some traction to, millions and millions of dollars in net worth. But what would be the purpose of, I think probably I'll say it this way. Most people are coming through thinking that they want to do all this fancy stuff, and I'm going to just throw words out there like the Rockefeller method, right?
Right.
Like, I wrote the book, the foreword for Garrett Gunderson's book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? And we do a lot of these strategies. But a lot of times what I find is people are like, I want to do that because thinking about generational wealth creation, and
it's exciting.
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
But the reality is people are not ready for that most of the time, right? It's like they're a little over their skis, they're moving a little too fast. I love the phrase, slow down to go fast, right? Like we gotta build the foundation of what we're trying to do. And so you're saying a revocable trust is just a great place to start.
Yeah, and even when we write those exotic trusts when a client needs them, they all reference back to the revocable living trust, and that's your kind of pivot point for everything else. And the revocable living trust is more about protecting your significant other, spouse, and children. So as you're building the empire and you're younger and you get in an auto accident, your wife is not going to know everything about your business she's not going to know where all those accounts are.
Yeah.
And if you and your wife pass at the same time, you've got a lot of problems that this other asset protection trust won't solve and is not designed to solve. But the revocable living trust, a will with guardianship built in, these are things that protect your most precious assets, which are your family. And so a lot of business owners spend a lot of time in the weeds over in the exotic stuff, and they're exposed over here because they don't have a revocable living trust that protects their family and the rights of their family if they get incapacitated or pass. If that makes sense. And that's a big glaring hole with a lot of our seasoned business owners that come to us, and they only have a basic will, but they might have some asset protection they've put together with corporations or LLCs, but they're still left to where all of those companies, if not set up properly, will still have to pass through probate because they're not tied back to this revocable living trust. So we try to start with basic things that just cost a few thousand to set up, as opposed to a $100,000 exotic trust they'll never use in their lifetime.
I love that. So one of the things I love about what you guys do, and we were talking about this before we started filming, is there's so much, and I mentioned this already, there's so much clickbait, there's so much about just people trying to sell, whether it's a spendthrift trust, whether it's like these trusts to kind of quote unquote avoid taxation and defer taxation indefinitely or into perpetuity. People are positioning it like that on social media like it's the way to go. First of all, don't do that. It's not legal. Secondly, what I love about your guys' process is it's not about bringing people in to sell them a specific trust. It's about bringing people in to find clarity about where they're at, what their assets, income, goals, objectives, values, beliefs, like everything ties together. And through that process, you can figure out the trust structure and how it all plays together. Because the reality is, like, can you talk a little bit about, all right, we have a revocable trust. Now, how do you utilize that and stack other structures and creations along with it?
No, that's a great question. So one of the first things that we do with especially with our younger entrepreneurs that are just getting started, is we'll say, let's set up your revocable living trust with what we call ancillary documents. And those are like your healthcare and power of attorneys, things like that. And that's step number one. Step number two is to look at what business activities they're starting. So a lot of our clients will be a blend of W-2 income versus, say, business income.
Sure.
And a lot of folks that we come across will have set up an LLC already, but possibly done it the wrong way. Okay. And so the first thing we're going to do is look at what type of business they have and what liabilities that type of business has. And then we talk to them about their goals. How fast do you want to grow? What's your actual revenue? And how much do we need to protect? And then we make an appropriate recommendation on different things like what type of LLC you're going to set up. If you're a professional like an attorney, a doctor, a realtor, for example, that's a different type of entity. Maybe they don't know that. If they don't have an operating agreement, no matter where you're at in your business life cycle, you need that operating agreement. And that's the first tie-in that goes back to your revocable living trust.
Is it fair to say that when you set up a trust and you do all these things, like obviously you have different individuals coming in and real estate agents, life insurance agents, small business owners, whatever, they're all over the map as far as like what they do. But setting up the trust isn't the most important part. It's like how you utilize it and execute with it, and how you keep track of the records and how you file, and how, like, I don't even know all the right words to use, but it's the execution is the most important part, because I know so many people that have spent $50,000 on a trust and then been like, I didn't even use it. Like, I didn't set it up. I didn't finalize this, that, whatever. I got the legal entity in place, but then I didn't move the things into the trust. I didn't, there's always these steps. So can you talk about the importance of working with somebody that's going to hold your hand and make sure that all that stuff is done properly? Yeah,
I think you nailed it, because it's after the execution of setting up the legal documents, we're going to make sure that you, number one, fund that trust properly, meaning actually getting assets into the trust.
Yeah.
And without that, the trust is really worthless. So the first one is titling your home into your revocable living trust.
Cool.
And most people have debt against their home when they start out, and making sure that you work with your bank to make sure they don't give you any resistance about putting it into the trust.
Okay.
And they can't stop you from doing that. Now, as far as other blind spots that we see with our younger folks and younger entrepreneurs is when they set up their first LLC, especially without an operating agreement, and they pass away suddenly. They may have a trust set up here, a revocable living trust, but because they bought it online from what we call a template generator, not an actual law firm, that they don't have the advice to make sure all of their other entities are tied back to that revocable living trust. And the way that we do that is not to have the trust own the other business entities. And the reason that we do that, Chris, that we say don't do that actually is because if the entity gets sued, we don't want to draw in the trust into that lawsuit because it's the owner of this entity.
Got it.
So we create a private document called an operating agreement that says if you pass away, that the trustee of the trust is now in control of this business.
Cool.
And can liquidate the assets, keep payroll going. And a lot of business owners, especially when you get big enough to have employees, don't realize that if your business goes through probate, it takes anywhere from 3 months to 18 months. But many times the judge is freezing assets until all the creditor claims can be processed. And most employees can't wait 3, 6, 9 months to get paid, and the business folds and there's no legacy for the children. So if, again, we look at what the end goals are depending on where you're at in the life cycle of your family and your business, and make sure you've got the adequate protections in place for what's happening right now. Not what might happen in 50 years when you've got the empire and you need the Rockefeller-style trust, but what's happening now. If that makes sense.
So I think like anything else, this is whether we're talking financial planning, investments, life insurance, trust planning, you got to start somewhere, right? And starting, don't wait until you have tons of assets and then think you're going to figure it out, because you're going to run into problems and you're going to be totally exposed in the process, right? So by going through a process with an organization like API Law that knows exactly what they're doing, they've helped thousands of people go through this process and they understand all the bear traps to avoid, then you can set it up, protect yourself along the way, and set yourself up for success. I mean, you gotta have the roadmap for planning, right? Like if you know what the next check marks are on where you're trying to go based on growth and business planning, revenue planning, and whether you're doing real estate or building a business and acquiring more properties or whatever it is, you can kind of know the different benchmarks that you're going towards. And if you start at the very beginning, even before you have a ton of revenue, your family and your business partners and your employees, everybody will be a little bit more protected, but then you can scale it as you go, like that. And I think that's a thing that, from what I hear from people don't understand, is that they think that I just got to do this trust and it's just once I do it, it's done, or once and they don't realize that, okay, it's a living, breathing entity. Just like your business is going to change over life. You can update these things, and you can, if you structure it the right way, you can stack it all together properly to accomplish your goals and objectives. But if you don't do it the right way at the beginning, you're going to cause a lot of problems for yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. We get a lot of clients that come to us that unfortunately may resist some of the initial advice we give them because they're giving themselves their own legal advice because they've ChatGPT'd it or they have done their own research on YouTube. And guys, it's important to understand some of the basic concepts, but when a doctor goes in, you don't start telling that doctor how to cure yourself. And so we get a lot of that, unfortunately. And so one of the big things that we get early on in the life cycle is, I don't need this until I get this. Okay, I don't need to get a revocable living trust until I have a house and until I get married. But a lot of times our young single people aren't passing away from cancer. They're passing away from things like road rage accident, for example. That's the most common way that young people get killed today, is by dying in an auto accident. And when that happens, if it's not their fault, there is a windfall that comes to that estate. And so when that $1 million payout comes to that single entrepreneur, okay, and now the family has no estate to have any tax advantages, and there could be creditors, friends, enemies that now can see all of that action, okay, coming into that account, okay, because it's public record, and that's unprotected. And then there's no will or trust to say where that money goes. Another big thing is that our business owners will buy assets, either a building or rental properties or equipment, and it goes into their personal name, and it just makes it on public record forever. And then when we come along, we say, hey, actually, you need to structure these things under certain types of entities so that they're protected under state law, so that if your business gets sued, they can't come take all your personal stuff. Nice. So we have to reverse engineer, but sometimes the damage is already done. And so again, not creating a paper trail of how you own assets, especially rental properties, is really critical. So you set these things up in advance, and they're very inexpensive to set up and maintain. And we help you maintain the compliance of those things. And when it's time to grow your business, you now have the proper foundation to do it safely and with the privacy and anonymity that comes along with some of the strategies we give you as well.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, guys, hopefully this is a good introductory. If you're contemplating setting up a trust, if you've kind of been curious about what it would look like in your life, how to get started, how like what type of trust, how to fund it, what assets, how different ways it would protect your family. We're putting this series together to answer all the questions. So this is just kind of the entry point into it. The next video we're going to do is going to be talking about asset protection utilizing trusts. And so we're going to take this and we're going to expand upon it all and go a little bit deeper. And so if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. That way you're notified when that video comes out, or I'll put it on the end screen right here and you can check it out. As always, if you want to get a hold of API Law, if you want to talk to them, you can go down in the link in the description below and just click on it, and you can set up a call. And literally, it's just a clarity call. It's just information. They want to figure out if it's even the right fit for you. I mean, that's ultimately what this is all about. Because, I know how overwhelming it can be to like try to figure this all out on yourself, on your own, right? So having somebody you can call, it's not going to be just a hardcore sales pitch. It's going to be seeking clarity about what's going on with you so they can actually guide you to make sure that you're protected in alignment with what you actually need. So thanks so much for being here, Sean.
Thanks, Chris.
Or having me. I'm in your studio. What am I talking about? So it's good to be here, and so excited to do the next videos, and we will see you then. Take care.